1. Earlier in the week, I was on vacation at a lake house in Indiana. 4 nights in, something very strange happened. I was laying on the couch ready for bed when I remembered I left my iPod in the kitchen. I listened to music as I sleep. I stood up, turning the light from my phone on, and retrieved my iPod from the kitchen table. I returned to the couch and I looked in the mirror hanging above the sofa. Behind me I saw a tall black figure standing in front of the television. I looked at it for several seconds. Then I turned around expecting to see something, my family or friends left in the room, before we went to bed. Nothing was there. Not anything I could have portrayed as being a person. I glanced back at the mirror, and it was no longer standing in that location. I decided there could have been a logical explanation, and it was nothing for me to worry about. However, I was slightly mistaken. To get my mind off of it, I called a friend of mine. We were talking for 20 minutes when I saw something drop down from the ceiling. It looked like a long string that overlapped itself a few times, white in color and slightly translucent. The best thing I can compare it to is a floater in your eyes. Not everyone's eyes contain these, so look it up if you're not familiar with what I'm speaking about. It stopped right in front of my phone. I thought it was a bug, except something was odd about it. I did not see wings moving, I didn't hear its wings fluttering, and it was floating right in front of my phone screen, completely stationary. I smacked it. It flew straight to the side and straight back in front of me once again. I tried to punch it. I did not feel it, and I jumped up off the couch and ran to the light switch. I accidentally woke some people up in the process. I shook out my blanket, thinking it might have been an insect, but I saw absolutely nothing. I searched around the room. It was a good 6 inches, so if it happened to be a bug, it would be relatively easy to find. Nothing turned up. Since I accidentally woke up my friends, I told them about the strange events that just took place. Some were skeptical, as others believed it was something paranormal, and I may have gave them trouble sleeping the rest of the night. Oops. The remaining nights were relatively normal. Nothing out of the ordinary happened. Thoughts? 2. I'm a 27-year-old Asian male, and this event occurred in the summer of 2009. It has never left my mind, and I've been wanting to write this down for a long time. Has anyone ever played the video games called Fatal Frame for the PS2? Well, if you haven't, you can Google it. There were 3 parts to the series. So one day I went to my local GameStop to purchase a horror game because I love horror. I was looking through the shelves in the PS2 section and saw Fatal Frame 1, 2, and 3. I could not buy it all at once because I only had enough for one game, and each game was about $30. I only had 40. I was very indecisive on which one to get first, so I ended up picking the scariest cover, which was the second series. I was ecstatic to play this game once I got home. When I started playing the game, nothing happened at first. But as I progressed further towards the end, that's when things started happening. At first it was only minor things going on in the house, like light tapping and knocking, which I brushed off at first. After I finished the game in about 4 weeks, I went out to GameStop, but in a different town near my city. I was looking for the other series to the game, and saw all 3 were there. Again, I only had $40 to spend, and that meant only one game, so I chose the first series. I played and beat that game as well. I've noticed that activity in the house was building up and getting increasingly worse. Some of the lights would flicker, my huge living room TV turning on itself to the white and black screen that's all fuzzy and has that horrible sound. Some of you may know what I'm talking about. I literally would just watch this happen in front of my eye, the TV turning its own volume to max, and I would try to shut it off after a couple times. Then suddenly it stops. I would hear dishes fall off the dish racks I leave on the counters, hear footsteps in the hallway and stairs when no one was around, and hear the damn toilet flush. I knew in my mind I couldn't just stop there. So I went to another different GameStop at a different city to buy the last part to the series. Why? I don't know. Different mall, I guess. When I got back home with the last series, it felt really dark, or dense, like the atmosphere thickened. A strange feeling. As I was walking to my room, the density just felt darker, and when I started playing the game, it felt like there were many eyes behind me. I was playing this game on really high volume by myself with the door closed to intensify that feeling and atmosphere. About 3 weeks after I had the game, I was near the very last boss, and this is when shit really went down. My sister would tell me in the mornings she would see black shadows walk down the hallways and sometimes walk in her room. This one time she told and showed me a bruise on her upper left inner thigh. She told me she'd seen a black shadow walk in her room and then float above her bed to touch her leg, and it would vanish. I got goosebumps and chills when she showed me. That morning when my sister told me, I knew I had to beat the game. I don't know. It was just something in me telling me to beat that damn fucking game. So that night I finally beat the last boss, but while defeating it, my room would feel like it's vibrating. I don't know if it was from the video game soundtrack, but I was hearing many whispering in my ears, like people are really close, and my walls would sometimes bang all around. The next morning when I woke up, everything felt normal again. No dark presence or atmosphere, and no eyes on me. It's like everything just stopped, as if nothing happened. As the months passed by, all 3 series of my games went unexplained. The first series mysteriously went missing, and I never let anyone borrow my games, so all I have is just the game cover. The second series barely even works, it freezes after a certain part of the game, and the third series has a bunch of scratches on the bottom in a strange circle. And I'm the type of person that cares for the games, making sure it doesn't get scratched or damaged. So that's my experience, I just wanted to share. Thank you. 3. So I moved into the house I am currently in, around November 2017 with my partner and a couple of friends. We like to prank each other every now and then, but we'd never go for such a long-term prank, as we'd get bored. Anyway, to the story. We had a couple of friends round and were just sat around playing games and drinking beers, when one of my friends, who is partially deaf, relevant for later, goes to the toilet down the hall. After he goes, we're just having small talk, not being too loud, when we hear a female voice clearly say, "Are you all right?" We all heard it, and stopped what we were doing to listen out in case it was just someone out the front we could hear in case a window was open or something. But we didn't hear anything else. Our friend comes back from the toilet and we ask him about it, to which he responds that he didn't hear anything. Now I said he is partially deaf, but not bad enough that if it was someone out front he would have definitely heard it, as he was closer to the front of the house than we were. We tried to explain it away, such as maybe the cat just made an elaborate noise, but we could specifically hear words, and we all heard it say the same thing. We thought the friend that went to the toilet just loaded up a video to play a prank on us, but he wouldn't have kept it going this long. We're really not sure what it was, but the friend who went to the toilet doesn't believe us and thinks we're just messing with him, which again, we wouldn't do for this long. Skip ahead a couple of weeks, and we are sat round the table playing a board game called One Night Ultimate Werewolf. Basically, you have cards that depict different roles that do different things to change the game state, and you have to figure out who, if anyone, has a werewolf card. There is one role called the Curator, and he gets tokens that he can put on someone's card that changes the card or makes a new role or rule for the chosen player. We get our cards and close our eyes and go through the motions of the game, as that is what you're meant to do. Once we open our eyes, we see that one of our friends, strangely the friend who doesn't believe we heard the voice, has a Curator counter on his card. I can't remember what specific token it was and what change it made, but anyway, we go through the game, vote on who we think the werewolf is, and then reveal our cards, and we were all surprised to see that none of us had the Curator card. Again, our friend calls us out and says we're messing with him, but we are all adamant that none of us had moved the token as a joke. Again, we tried to explain it. Maybe someone accidentally knocked the token on, as the pile of tokens was nearby stacked like a tower. However, only the one token had moved, and it was perfectly in the center of the card. Almost too perfectly to have just been accidentally knocked on. Recently my partner had slept in. It was a weekend, so it didn't really matter. However, he was woken up by a banging on the door. No one in the house banged it. One of the girls in the house said she dropped her straighteners upstairs, which could have caused the bang, but my partner was adamant that it was a bang on the door. It could have been because we had the window open, which can move the door as the latch is a bit loose. But usually when this happens, it is not loud enough to wake us up, even on really windy days. I'm not saying this is definitely a ghost. For all I know, all my housemates are full of poop, but it just doesn't seem that way. We still joke about it now, and none of us are really too sure. With the activity getting the way it did, it almost seems like a caretaker kind of ghost, or a curator like the token, asking us if we're all right, showing us its intentions through the token, giving my partner a wake-up call. If I were to say it's a ghost, it seems to be very passive, only showing itself to let us know that it is there, and sometimes to be helpful. Just an interesting story, never had any other experiences in my life, and definitely not considering using a Ouija board, as all I've heard is that is bad news and to stay away from it. What do you think? I live with a bunch of pranking idiots, or we have a friendly presence watching over us? 4. I've had a lot of paranormal and demonic activity occur in my life, and I never really questioned it until after I converted over into Christianity. I'm 22 now, and I can easily say that I've seen and heard demons and angels in my life. So I guess I'll start with the first encounter I've ever had, which was 13 years ago. So when I was 9, I had just moved up north from Virginia, after which we had moved into a smallish 2-story house, which seemed to be falling in on itself. After some research and some evidence found in a shed next door, my family and I figured the house was built in the late 1800s, early 1900s. Also found a small piece of paper in the shed that said something about a coffin building creepy. All in all, not very creepy. Actually kind of cool if you ask me. Now, we were neighbors with this older lady, let's call her Kathy. Kathy was a sweetheart, and always gave me candy and jewelry for helping her around the house. Kathy was a widow, and 80+ years old, never found out her real age. Was knocking at death's door. She always joked about how her husband was haunting the garage because the lights would randomly turn on, and an outside light, which worked fine most of the time, would randomly flicker on and off at around 2:30 to 4 a.m. Most of this stuff can be chalked up to faulty wiring and chance. But the first time I experienced something I really couldn't explain was about 8 months after moving into the house. I was dead asleep, and oftentimes I experienced this spinning sensation in my bed before I was asleep. Though I chalk this up to just some balance issues that I had when I was younger. So I woke up with the same spinning sensation, and I feel kind of sick. It changes this time, and I feel like I'm shaking. After a few minutes of this, I realize that it isn't just a feeling, and that my bed is actually shaking. And this is when I really wake up. Now remember, I'm only 9, so it's not like I'm not going to freak out at this. So I'm curled up in the corner of my bunk bed and scared out of my mind at this point. But something possesses me to look out of my window. I see the light flickering on and off at a much faster pace than usual. And my neighbor's porch light is doing the same. I'm thoroughly freaked out. So I go to look at my parents' room, which typically has a TV on inside, acting as a makeshift nightlight. But there was nothing, just black. I shut my eyes and just kinda sit there, when I get the feeling that I just need to open my eyes. So I do, and I look towards the top of the stairs and I see the silhouette of a man. Honestly, he kind of looked like Colonel Sanders, in a pure white suit with a cane staring at me. At this point I am thoroughly freaked out, and so I start wailing, and the dude just straight up disappears while I'm staring at him. My mom came rushing into the room, and within a few minutes I'm sufficiently calmed and back to sleep. Fast forward a few weeks. I'm 10 now, and I'm talking to my neighbor Kathy. And we end up on the topic of her deceased husband. About 15 minutes into this conversation, I ask her what this guy looked like, and whether he was a nice guy or not. Just typical kid questions. I kid you not. She described the man I had saw a few weeks prior, and then proceeds to talk about how, in his early 30s, he began to walk with a limp and needed a cane. It was all pretty tame, compared to later events, but it was my first supernatural experience. I don't think this entity was there to hurt or scare me, just grab my attention, which it did thoroughly. 5. Back in 2014, I decided to move in with a couple of my friends from high school. We had recently graduated and were looking to split rent costs between 4 people in a 3-bedroom apartment. I was sharing the master bedroom with a close friend from high school, who we'll just call Ben for the sake of anonymity. We moved into the apartment in June, and for the first few weeks things were going fine. However, at one point around August, things began to take a sudden turn for the worse. My friend came home one day from work and was home alone. I was the second to arrive home that day, and found Ben sitting outside the apartment under the stairwell, visibly upset. I asked them what was going on, and they told me the following story. They arrived home from work and took a shower, but the entire time they were in there, he heard several loud noises in the apartment. He had just assumed that someone had came home, but when he came out into the living room, he saw something terrifying. According to Ben, there appeared to be a shadowy figure of a small child standing in the corner of the dining room. He ran out the back door and waited outside until one of us got home. That same night, I woke up in the middle of the night and had a horrible sleep paralysis episode. I saw a boy at the foot of my bed glaring at me with a horrible look in his eyes. My first thought was that this was just my imagination creating this image due to my friend's experience. As time went on, however, I was proven to be very wrong. My friend was slowly spiraling out of control, missing his shifts, sleeping all day, etc. Eventually, he started lashing out at everyone and crying himself to sleep at night. These behaviors were very unusual for him, so we consulted a medium to see if the root cause of his behavior was something paranormal. According to them, Ben was being haunted by a demonic attachment that he had for years. They called the entity Espa, or a lower-level demon which feeds on the spiritual energies of their victims until they move on to their next victim. Another one of our roommates, we'll call him Ryan, was having a hard time sleeping and hearing knocking in the closet at night. The medium told me in private, as not to scare Ryan, that the Espa planned to attach to him next. I came home from an early shift the next day and nobody was home. After working up the courage to walk inside, I finally went in and checked the rooms to make sure I was alone. I discovered that Ryan's room was an absolute mess, and this was very unusual for him because it was always clean. After this physical experience, something might be going on. We invited the medium over to help us out with a banishment ritual. The following night, we invited Ben into the living room and conducted the ritual. I won't go into the details, the medium did most of the stuff, but we eventually saw a bright white light flash in the room. At this point is where my perspective on the paranormal completely changed. We clearly saw a large shadow hover above Ben, pause in the air, then fly outside the patio door. The energy inside our apartment immediately felt so much lighter, and my friend appeared to feel much better. Unfortunately, the demonic entity was not banished completely. About a week later, everyone in the house complained of intense nightmares and trouble sleeping. For the most part, they involved a family that lost a little boy somehow. I have no idea how this is connected to the Espa that was attached to Ben, and would love to hear your input. About 2 weeks after the ritual is when the worst paranormal experience of my life occurred. I woke up in the middle of the night, with the most intense feeling of dread that I have ever felt before. I realized that I was not experiencing sleep paralysis, and was therefore very alarmed. I felt drawn to look out the window that was right above Ben's bed on the other side of the room. Outside the window, clear as day, I saw a demonic entity looking right at me. It had a beak-like face with red eyes, large bony talons for fingers, and genuinely made me feel sick with dread. I ran into my other roommate Katie's room and slept on the floor. After that night, I decided that I could not take being in this dark environment. I moved back in with my family and have not seen the demon since. Any input on what that thing was, how it connects with the family we saw in our nightmares, and why Ben got this attachment in the first place would be appreciated. I do not know for sure it was an Espa, as this was just what the medium told us. The demonic entity that I saw outside the window that night still scares me to this day. Again, I expect people to be skeptical of the paranormal, but welcome any thoughts you have on this experience. Thank you for listening to my story. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Paranormal Stories, episode 92, and thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. I'll just give the weekly reminder, if you have any questions for the upcoming Q&A, which will feature in the 100th episode, you can just ask them in the comment section of any video, wherever happens to be convenient for you. You don't have to search out a specific one. Just the most recent one will do if it's easiest for you, and I'll get them capped and answered in time for episode 100. Okay, and with that, I'm heading off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.